It started with a knock that shook the morning calm like a gunshot. I opened the door to find Karen Witherspoon standing on my porch in her usual uniform, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand, floral blouse that screamed I run the world, and a sour frown as if smiling might burn her soul. "I'm here about your son," she said without greeting. "My what?" "Your son. The one in the wheelchair," she said, voice crisp like she was reporting a noise violation, not talking about my paralyzed child. My jaw clenched. "You mean Adam?" Karen glanced over her sunglasses with that smug smirk I'd grown to despise over the years. "Yes, Adam. We've had some complaints." "Complaints," I repeated, already feeling my blood simmer. "About the medical van parked out front. About the ramps you've installed. And the excessive time he spends outside on the patio." I blinked. "The patio? In his own home?" Karen didn't flinch. "This community has aesthetic standards. ADA compliance is one thing, but this has become an eyesore." I was stunned. Adam had been paralyzed in a car accident 2 years ago. Since then, we'd made the house accessible so he could reclaim some of his independence. He loved sitting on the patio with his therapy dog, Benji, reading or just feeling the sun on his face. And apparently, that was now a crime in Karen's HOA kingdom. "You're out of line," I snapped. Karen sniffed and made a dramatic note on her clipboard. "I'm just doing my job. The board has received multiple concerns." Funny, I was the board. Of course, she didn't know that. I'd acquired full voting power quietly years ago through a holding company when the HOA's previous leadership collapsed from mismanagement. Karen had wormed her way into the management committee later, barking rules at anyone who couldn't fight back. I'd let her run with the leash just long enough to hang herself. "You'll be receiving a formal notice," she said with a final sniff. "You have 14 days to remove the ramp or face a violation fine of $1,000 per day. You do realize what you're saying, right?" I said, barely keeping my voice calm. "You want me to remove disability access to my own home? That's illegal." Karen shrugged. "This community has standards." I took a deep breath. "Do me a favor, Karen. Put everything in writing. Every last word." "Oh, I will," she replied confidently. "You'll regret trying to bend the rules." I watched her march down the driveway, heels clicking like gunshots. Benji trotted over, ears perked, as if sensing the tension. Inside, Adam was reading, headphones on, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Well, if Karen wanted a war, she'd get one. She just didn't know she was about to go head-to-head with the real owner of the HOA. And I had plans. Big ones. 3 days after her uninvited visit, Karen delivered the violation notice. Not through email, not through official channels, she personally taped it to our front door like some kind of medieval threat. Bold red font across the top. "Notice of non-compliance, mandatory modification required." According to Karen's made-up logic, the wheelchair ramp violated community harmony and aesthetic alignment, never mind that the ramp was built with a permit and matched the house's color scheme perfectly. Adam found the notice first. I came home from the store and saw him holding it with trembling hands. His face was pale, jaw tight. "Mom, are they kicking me out?" he asked. I gently took the letter from him and read through it. "No one's kicking anyone out," I said, my voice steel beneath the calm. "Karen just doesn't know what game she's playing." He gave me a look. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" I smiled. "Adam, honey, I've been letting things go for years. This is the last straw." That night, I made some calls. First to my lawyer, Carol, a ferocious, sharp-witted bulldog in heels with a specialty in ADA law. She practically cackled when I read her the letter. She did what Carol said. "You know what this is, right? A lawsuit gift wrapped in HOA stationery." "Oh, it gets better," I said. "She doesn't know I own the HOA." There was a pause. "Oh, now I'm interested. Want to go public with it?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far she takes it. Let her bury herself." The next morning, Karen held her usual HOA compliance patrol stroll, complete with a little laminated badge and her Yorkie named Caviar in tow. I happened to be outside trimming hedges when she sauntered past. She spotted me and smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a cornered mouse. "Lovely weather today," she chirped. "Perfect for lawsuits," I replied sweetly. Her smile wavered. "Oh," she said. "You didn't take the letter personally, did you?" I stood straight and gave her the kind of stare that makes a person forget how to blink. "Karen, you're not enforcing the rules, you're targeting a disabled young man for existing." "I'm enforcing aesthetics," she insisted. I pointed at her front yard, plastic flamingos, a pink mailbox shaped like a cat, and mismatched shutters. You mean your aesthetics? She scoffed and waved a hand. Let's not be petty. Too late for that, I said. You taped a violation notice to my door, threatened fines, and tried to bully my son. So now I filed a formal ADA complaint and hired a lawyer. Karen's face stiffened. That's unnecessary. And I've scheduled a board meeting, I added with a smile. Oh, good, she said quickly. I'll bring the latest violation logs. I leaned closer. No need. I'll be running the meeting. Her mouth dropped open. You're what? I'm the majority holder of the HOA board. Bought it out 4 years ago after the embezzlement scandal. You know, the one you always blame on the last president? So, technically, I am the HOA. Karen stood frozen like someone had just unplugged her brain. I gave her one last smile. You've been writing threatening letters to your boss. She didn't say a word, just turned and walked off, caviar trailing behind, unaware that her leash was now wrapped around her owner's entire fate. And I hadn't even started the fireworks yet. Karen arrived at the community clubhouse wearing her power color, bright orange, and a matching scarf tied tight like she meant business. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed, she strutted in like she was queen of the suburbs. She hadn't spoken to me since our last encounter, but I could tell by the way she glanced around the room that she was convinced this meeting was her moment to reassert dominance. She had no idea what was coming. The room filled quickly. More residents than usual showed up, likely because Karen had stirred up drama like it was a neighborhood bake sale. Word travels fast when someone's picking on a kid in a wheelchair. And even faster when that kid's mother turns out to be the HOA's silent majority vote. I sat at the head of the table. Karen took the seat to my left, clearly annoyed that I'd claimed the center. She cleared her throat and launched into her prepared speech. Before we begin, she said, all smugness and self-importance, I'd like to address an egregious violation that threatens the visual integrity of our lovely community. Sit down, Karen, I said calmly. She blinked. Excuse me. This meeting's agenda has changed, I said, sliding a new document to the center of the table. It was crisp, official, and signed by me. We'll be discussing abuse of authority, targeted harassment, and ADA non-compliance. Someone in the back actually clapped. Karen turned beet red. You don't get to change the agenda. Actually, I said, tapping the document, as majority holder and acting HOA president, I can. She stared at me, stunned. You're bluffing. Carol, my lawyer, stood up in the back. She's not. Karen swiveled to look at her. Who are you? I'm the attorney representing the Wexler family, Carol said. And I'm also here on behalf of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They've taken an interest in your recent violation notice. A silence fell over the room like a dropped curtain. I was just following the rules, Karen said, voice smaller now. You made the rule up, I said, opening a binder labeled HOA bylaws. Nothing in our charter restricts accessibility modifications. In fact, it explicitly requires reasonable accommodation for disabled residents. A few neighbors muttered in agreement. But the ramp stays, I cut in. What doesn't stay is your position. Karen paled. You can't remove me. I can, and I just did. I held up a copy of the emergency vote, passed with a 2/3 majority from the board members I'd invited. Most had happily signed after years of being steamrolled by Karen's tyranny. You're no longer on the management committee, I added. Effective immediately, and pending the outcome of the ADA investigation, you may also face fines, or worse. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her jaw moved like she wanted to say something clever, but the words jammed at the door of her brain. I gave this HOA everything, she finally croaked. No, I said, standing up. You gave it a bad name. And with that, she stormed out of the room, tripping slightly over her own handbag as she went. I turned to the board. Now, let's talk about turning this HOA into a community that actually helps its residents. The applause that followed? Music to my ears. But I wasn't done with Karen yet. Not even close. After the board meeting blowout, Karen vanished for 2 days. No morning patrols. No unsolicited yard critiques. No friendly warnings scribbled in red pen on neighbors' trash bins. But then, like a moth too stubborn to recognize fire, she came back. And this time, she came swinging. It started with a sudden flurry of complaints filed against me, anonymously, of course. Everything from unpermitted gardening to suspicious backyard gatherings. One neighbor got a knock on their door from code enforcement after Karen accused them of harboring illegal chickens. They didn't even own a bird feeder. It was messy, petty, and exactly her style. But the real blow came when I opened my mailbox and saw a thick, official-looking envelope. Inside, a letter from a private attorney, Karen's new one. It alleged that my RAM, the very one she failed to have removed, had negatively impacted her mental health by disrupting her sense of order and aesthetically pleasing visuals, causing her stress, anxiety, and even insomnia. "She's suing you," Carol said, laughing so hard she choked on her coffee. "Oh, she's gone full tinfoil hat." But the real kicker? Karen attached photos of our house taken at night. From different angles, zoomed in. "She's stalking you," Carol said, her voice dropping. "This isn't just petty now. This is dangerous." I looked at the photos and my stomach turned. One shot was taken through Adam's bedroom window. That was it. I called the police. I also called a friend, Detective Lena Morales, who owed me a favor from back when I testified in a fraud case she worked. Lena took one look at the envelope and said, "You want her dealt with quietly or publicly?" "Let's go public," I said. "She wants an audience? Let's give her one." We invited the neighborhood to the next HOA community night under the guise of a transparency and trust open forum. Karen, ever the narcissist, showed up thinking it was her redemption arc. The clubhouse was packed. I stood at the podium, calm and composed, and began with a slideshow titled "Restoring Safety and Sanity, a Neighborhood Reclaimed." Slide 1, Karen's violation letter to my son. Slide 2, her text messages, forwarded to me by a neighbor she accidentally included on a group chat. Slide 3, the lawyer's letter claiming she had visual trauma because of a ramp for a paralyzed kid. Slide 4, the stalker photos. The room gasped. "This last one," I said, pausing on the window shot, "was taken at 2:37 a.m. last Thursday. That's my son's room. He was sleeping when this was taken." Someone in the audience shouted, "That's disgusting." Another, "She's unhinged." Karen tried to speak, but Lena, who had been sitting quietly in the back, stood up and showed her badge. "Karen Myers, you're being investigated for harassment, trespassing, and invasion of privacy," she said. "You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." Karen's face went pale, then red, then a weird shade of mushroom gray. She turned to me with wild eyes. "This is a setup. You can't do this to me. I am the community." "No," I said, stepping aside as Lena approached her, handcuffs ready. "You're just the problem, and now, you're being removed." Neighbors burst into applause again. This time, louder. Karen was escorted out of the building, handcuffed, furious, and silenced for the first time in years. But even as the doors shut behind her, I knew one final twist remained. She still didn't know the full extent of my plan. And it was almost time to show her. It had been 3 weeks since Karen's dramatic clubhouse arrest, and the neighborhood had never been more peaceful. Lawns were mowed with pride. Kids played in the cul-de-sac without being interrogated. Even the mailbox flowers started blooming again, as if nature itself had been waiting for her to leave. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she posted bail the very next morning, slapped on her favorite oversized sunglasses, and started sending out neighborhood-wide emails claiming she was the victim of a deep-state conspiracy. Apparently, I was the ringleader of a coup orchestrated by liberal plants and deep wheelchair sympathizers. I almost choked on my smoothie reading that one. The thing is, Karen still had no idea. No idea who she'd really been messing with. See, 15 years ago, before Adam was born, I co-founded the very HOA she tried to weaponize against us. I helped write the original charter and owned the highest percentage of property shares after a few neighbors sold me their voting rights to avoid committee drama. I didn't just sit on the board. I owned it. And Karen? She was appointed by a former interim president I'd personally recommended, as a joke. Never imagined she'd turn into a dictator with a clipboard. But I let her play HOA queen for 2 years. Let her think she ran the place. Let her hand out fines for overly passionate wind chimes and rebellious garbage bins, all while documenting every single unethical and discriminatory action she took. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's slow. Strategic. And this week, it was complete. I called an emergency homeowner vote to dissolve the current HOA charter entirely. We had overwhelming support. Turns out, folks weren't huge fans of being fined for planting unauthorized tulips. We installed a new board. More inclusive, transparent. I appointed a neighbor with a disabled daughter to the Accessibility Oversight Committee. And our new president? A retired social worker who specialized in community healing. Then came the letter. Delivered by certified mail, signed by every board member, and sweetened with a cherry on top. Karen Myers was officially banned from holding any leadership or advisory role in the HOA for life. Her property, while still hers, was now subject to the same standards and accountability she once wielded like a sword. But here's where it really got good. The lawsuit Karen filed claiming emotional distress from her accessibility ramp? Her lawyer dropped her. Turns out, stalking a child voids your credibility. She tried to file a new claim, only to discover that her property had quietly fallen out of compliance due to her own unapproved modifications. The retaining wall she had installed without a permit? A violation. She got fined by the very organization she once controlled. And when she tried to appeal, the hearing was held in the same clubhouse where she'd been arrested. In front of the new board. And me, smiling sweetly from the back row, next to Adam, who was eating a lollipop and wearing a shirt that said, "Access denied? Try me." Karen stormed out mid-meeting. Again. And that was the last we saw of her. She quietly listed her home a month later. The sign read, "Motivated Seller." No HOA drama. The irony? Her replacement, our newest neighbor, is a veteran in a wheelchair. And we built his ramp in 2 days flat. With the whole neighborhood helping.